Have you ever heard of a friendship so strong that when it broke, it literally tore a political party in two? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about today. This isn't just a story about two powerful men. It's about the domestic policies that ignited a political firestorm and led to one of the most consequential elections in American history. So, at the heart of all this drama are two larger-than-life figures. First, you've got Theodore Roosevelt, the activist. He was a showman, a real force of nature, who absolutely loved the spotlight. And then you have William Howard Taft, the judge. He was the complete opposite. Quiet, thoughtful, a guy who much preferred a law library to a cheering crowd. For a while, their differences made them the perfect team, until they didn't.
It's kind of hard to picture these two as anything but rivals, right? But for years, they were best friends and an absolute political dream team. So what on earth was the glue that held this unlikely pair together for so long?
Well, their bond was way deeper than just politics. It was a shared belief system. Both Roosevelt and Taft were progressives, through and through. They believed that the government shouldn't just sit on the sidelines. It had a real duty to step in and fix the big social problems of the day. You could say Roosevelt was the big idea guy, and Taft was the brilliant legal mind who made it all happen. It seemed like a perfect partnership. And Taft's career just took off like a rocket, with Roosevelt cheering him on every single step of the way. He went from being a respected judge to running the Philippines, and then right into the heart of D.C. as Roosevelt's Secretary of War. Taft was loyal, he was competent, he was Roosevelt's guy. So when Roosevelt decided not to run for a third term in 1908, there was only one person he trusted to carry on his work. So, with Roosevelt's full-throated endorsement, Taft walks right into the White House. But this is where the popular story starts to go off the rails. You often hear that Taft was a conservative who betrayed Roosevelt's progressive movement. But when you actually look at his domestic record, the truth is a whole lot more interesting. Okay, just think about this for a second. In just 4 years, Taft's administration launched over 90 lawsuits against powerful monopolies. That's more than the famous trustbuster Roosevelt managed in 7.5 years. And this one fact reveals a really crucial difference between the two men. It was all about style. See, Roosevelt was a genius at grabbing headlines. Everything he did was big and loud. Taft, on the other hand, was still the judge. He preferred to work behind the scenes, methodically, quietly. He was chasing the same progressive goals, just without all the fanfare. His whole presidency was about actions, not headlines. And make no mistake, Taft's progressive record was legit. He kept Roosevelt's conservation programs going, he successfully broke up the massive Standard Oil monopoly, and he even went after the giant U.S. Steel Corporation. By all accounts, he was doing the work. The progressive flame was definitely still lit. So if Taft was doing all this progressive stuff, where did it all go wrong? Well, while Taft was quietly working away, the ground was shifting under his feet. A couple of really bitter fights over domestic policy were about to blow up, and they would threaten to destroy not just his friendship with Roosevelt, but the entire Republican Party. The first big fight was over something called tariff reform. Now, I know, it sounds kind of dry, but trust me, back then, this was a huge deal. Progressives believed that high taxes on imported goods only helped the big, powerful monopolies in the East, while making everyday stuff more expensive for regular people, especially farmers out west. So for them, lowering the tariff was a top priority. Taft tried to tackle it, but his attempt at reform was a complete political disaster. The bill that came out of Congress, the Payne-Aldrich tariff, did the exact opposite of what progressives wanted. It basically helped Eastern factories at the expense of Western farms. And then Taft made a critical error. He not only signed the bill, he called it the best tariff bill the Republican Party ever passed. Progressives in his own party, they went ballistic. But the final straw, the thing that really made this personal, was the firing of a man named Gifford Pinchot. Pinchot was the head of the U.S. Forest Service, but he was so much more than that. He was a leading progressive icon, and most importantly, one of Theodore Roosevelt's closest friends. Roosevelt was off on a safari in Africa, and when the news hit that Taft had fired his friend, it was like a political earthquake. With his party literally falling apart, Roosevelt knew he couldn't stay away any longer. He cut his trip short and sailed back to America. And let me tell you, he was not coming home to quietly retire. He was coming home for a fight. And he came back armed with a bold, new, and way more radical platform he called the New Nationalism. He was now calling for things like major social welfare programs, even tougher business regulations, and a much, much bigger role for the government in people's lives. He even declared that social justice was more important than property rights, a direct shot at the old-school Republicans.
So the 1912 Republican Convention was just an absolute showdown. It wasn't about policy anymore, it was personal, it was bitter. Taft, as the sitting president, controlled the party machinery and managed to secure the nomination. But in the process, he completely alienated Roosevelt and his millions of supporters. The friendship wasn't just cracked, it was shattered for good.
So what does a guy like Teddy Roosevelt do when he feels he's been cheated? He doesn't go home and sulk. No, he walks out and he starts a whole new party, the Progressive Party. And when a reporter asked if he was really up for the challenge, Roosevelt famously roared back that he felt as fit as a bull moose. The name stuck, and just like that, the legendary Bull Moose Party was born, setting up an unbelievable three-way race for the presidency. And so the stage was set for an epic clash of titans. You had Taft, the official Republican nominee. You had Roosevelt, the fiery Bull Moose challenger. And waiting in the wings was the Democratic candidate, Woodrow Wilson. The Republican Party was about to go to war with itself, and the whole country was watching. When all the votes were counted, the results were just a brutal picture of what had happened. Roosevelt and Taft split the Republican vote right down the middle. Together, they got 50% of the vote, but individually, they didn't stand a chance. It handed a clear, decisive victory to Woodrow Wilson, who became president with only 42% of the vote. For Taft, that loss had to be crushing politically. But you know what? It may have been a personal blessing, because the truth is, his heart was never really in being president. His true passion, the one job he'd always wanted, a job Roosevelt had actually offered him multiple times, was to be a justice on the Supreme Court. And in 1921, he finally got his wish. Taft was appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and he absolutely thrived. When you look at the arc of his life, his presidency almost seems like a detour. He was a man of the law, first and foremost. As he said himself, he never felt as at home in the White House as he did on the court. So that leaves us with this fascinating question. How should we remember William Howard Taft? Do we remember him for that one tumultuous term as president that split his party? Or should we remember him for his long and, by many accounts, incredibly successful tenure as the head of the entire judicial branch? His story is a powerful reminder that legacies are almost never as simple as they look.